Okay, so today we are in the FlyByWire A320 in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So this is the Microsoft Flight Simulator A320 with the FlyByWire mod installed in the community folder, which makes a lot of the avionics systems work a lot more accurately. This is the stable version of the mod as of mid-December 2021. So let's have a look at our flight plan. If I go and look in Little Nav Map, we are going to fly from Stansted in the southeast of the UK, and we're going to fly the CLN4S departure, or standard instrument departure, and then fly across the channel and go and land at Rotterdam. So during the flight I'll fly it out obviously onto the standard instrument departure, and then I will pause recording because obviously you don't want to sit and watch the aeroplane fly the middle 100 miles of the route. But then when we're on the approach into Rotterdam, I'll start recording again, so you'll see a sudden break in the recording because you really don't want to listen to me whittering on the way. So this is really a flight to take a look at the A320 and to see if it actually works okay, because I've had a few people tell me they've had issues with it recently, and I've not experienced those issues, but then maybe I've not been using the most up-to-date version that they have, or maybe there's a change in World Update 7 of the simulator or something like that. So let's see how we get on. Okay, so we can see it's a kind of a misty afternoon at Stansted. What is the time? The local time is just coming up for 2:30 in the afternoon. You can see it's looking quite odd outside. Okay, first things first, in the Airbus we go and switch on the batteries. We can see we have external power available, so we will use it. We'll also turn on the APU and switch it on. We'll go and align the IRS system. And that should be good for the moment, so we'll leave it in that situation for the moment while we go and set the cockpit up. We'll go and check the rest of the switches in a moment. So turn the brightness up on these two screens. Let's do the brightness for the other two screens, for the co-pilot's screens. And then for the engineering screens here, the knobs are down here, so we'll turn those up to a bit brighter so we can see them. And you can see the APU flap is open. It should start providing power anytime soon, which will be good. And then we can come off the external power. There it goes. So we can get rid of the external power now, because we are using the auxiliary power unit. Okay, while we're up here, actually no, we'll do lights and everything later. Let's just go and get the flight plan programmed in. So we're going to go into the FMC, and we're going to go to init, and we're going to go and put our route in. So we are EGSS, and we're going to, let's have a look at the map, EHRD, Echo Hotel Romeo Delta. And we program that into the from to field. Give it a moment, and then we go and return. And we give ourselves a flight number, so we will put in ABC 123, we just make something up. Cost index, we'll put in 50. The cost index goes into a formula that derives how aggressively the aircraft can accelerate. So it's how much fuel you can use to do standard operations, basically. So you can either be as wasteful or as efficient as you like, but that will impact on your climb rates and things like that. Flight level. So how far is the route? It's only 100 miles or so. So should we go for, we're going east. East is odd in terms of flight levels usually. So we'll go for 25,000 feet. So we can put 250 because it's flight level it's asking for. We can type 25,000, but we can also put flight level 250. Flight levels are the feet divided by 100 basically. So if we just put 250 in, it tells us at the top of our flight, or at the cruise, will be at minus 34 degrees. It's automatically estimating that. It's saying here GPS primary, so we can go init GPS and come back out of there, and we can clear the message. And then what do we want to do next? We'll do our departure and arrival, I guess. So we go into flight plan, and we can see the the airfields that we've already put in. So now we can select each one to go and choose how we're going to leave and arrive. So departure from Stansted, runway 04, and we are going to use the CLN4S departure. So there it is there. So we select it on the soft key, and it's selected it above here, we can see it, and then we insert it. So then we go to EHRD, which is Rotterdam, and we say we want to arrive onto, and let's go and have a look, runway 06 via the start COA2R. So we're going ILS into runway 6, and the approach is COA2R, which is this one. So that's got both of the bits we need, and it's got some vias here, DOFMU and MASOS. Let's see if that relates. It's the DOFMU one that we're going for. Okay, so we then insert that into our flight plan. Okay, so if we look at our flight plan now, and we can step through it with the arrow keys. So the arrow keys push the screen in the direction you press the arrow keys. If I press up, it pushes the whole flight plan upwards. So what we're looking for here is to see if there are any discrepancies, or discontinuities, sorry, in the flight plan. So discontinuity is where the flight management computer doesn't understand how to get you from one part of the flight plan to another. But there are none, so it should be good to go. Okay, so let's go and get the engines and everything started up. So first things first, we're going to need to go and turn on the fuel pumps, which is great. Turn on the aircraft fuel supply while we're up here. Let's go and turn the lights on while we're here. So strobes on, beacons on, nav and logo on. Let's just turn everything on, shall we? We're going to look like a Christmas tree. It is getting near to Christmas anyway. Those lights to taxi. No smoking lights on, seatbelt signs on. Arm the emergency lights, and we're pretty much good to go overhead. So we're seeing faults here on the generators because the engines aren't running yet. So let's go and sort that out. So we need to turn on the APU bleed. So that provides the compressed air from the auxiliary power unit to spin up the engines. So we turn engine mode to start, and we start both engines. And you can see the N2 numbers coming up here. This is fine. We just check we have got the parking brake on, because we don't want to start rolling as soon as the engines spin up. So you should see, because we've switched the fuel pumps on, these should accelerate straight past 25%, and you'll see the fuel flow increase, the exhaust gas temperature rise, and the turbofan speed, the N1 speed, come up. So these are expressed as percentages of nominal, nominal being 100%. And we're looking good. So if we look on the little warning here, we've got TCAS is on standby at the moment, so we can come and look at TCAS. The TCAS is the Traffic Collision Avoidance System. So we're going to switch that on as well. Engines are coming up. As soon as the engines are stable, we will go and disengage the APU bleed, and we can turn the APU off as well. So that's just happened. That was that clonk you just heard. That was one of the relays cross-feeding across. So we're good. Let's go and look up above then. So we can turn off the APU bleed now, and we can turn off the APU. Okay! Looking good, and you can see the flight plan has started to appear, although it's reversed because we're facing the opposite direction than we'll actually be travelling. Let's go and set up the master control panel for the autopilot. Oh, there's somebody taxiing past out there in the mist. So on climb out, we'll go for 200 knots. So we'll just spin the mouse on this knob here, or 220 actually is better. If we were to go for selected mode on the heading, we can put the heading for 42 degrees is our initial climb out of the airfield. So let's go and set that up. We're going to go for managed mode as soon as we take off, to be honest. but I'm just going to set these back as fallback numbers. So 42 degrees is the direction of the runway, basically. We'll do an initial climb out to, now let's have a look at the SID. It's looking for 2.5, above 2.5, so these are all aboves, but we want to be 4,000 feet for CLN 4S. So we can see where that is on the map by having a quick look. So it wants us to 4,000 feet by then. So we'll go for 4,000 feet straight away, and we will say selected, and we'll climb out at a given speed, so 2,500 feet a minute, for example. And heading mode and selected speed mode, which is all good. Okay, so let's go and taxi off down to the end of the runway. Whoops. So we can switch the starter mode back to normal as well. The engines are now started. We turn the parking brake off. We won't actually start rolling usually straight away. You have to get a little bit of thrust to get the thing rolling, and then once it is rolling, you shouldn't actually need any thrust because there's a positive amount of thrust automatically, I should say. By having the engines at idle, there is a positive thrust. Now you can see the course is being highlighted as a dotted line at the moment. That's because we are in selected mode. If we were in managed mode, that would appear as a solid line. So let's actually illustrate that. If we go to here and say managed mode, and it's now gone to a solid line on the main display. So we're just going to taxi out. We're not going to bother with the tablet today, we're not going to bother with air traffic control. This is purely about having a look at the Airbus to see how it behaves at the moment, and to see if it follows the flight plan that we've programmed. So once we get to past the point where CLN 4S, where we're at 4,000 feet, we will increase our climb rate and go up to 25,000 feet for the rest of the journey. So at the point I've established that climb, that's where I will probably pause the video, and then you'll rejoin me on approach into Rotterdam. Okay, so if we have a look on the map, just so we can get our bearings of where we are. So we're taxiing along. And we're going to come in probably K onto the runway. Keep an eye on the aeroplane, make sure we're still fairly near the middle of the taxiway. Microsoft Flight Simulator is very pretty, isn't it? If we get that sun in the background, that's going to look pretty spectacular, probably. So we're rolling. We're not going to need the full runway, so let's just slow down, put the wheel brakes on. Okay, we can get away with taking off here. Now there is a plane waiting on the apron down there, so I may hold here for a moment and see what he's doing. Even though there is no collision detection in Microsoft Flight Simulator, it's still annoying when you're preparing for a flight and somebody dives in front of you. So I'm going to put the wheel brakes on briefly. Yeah, he was departing, look, so we can watch him go. Take the wheel brakes back off. And he's just taken off. So we'll taxi out. Okay, flaps to takeoff position. You can see we have a warning here that we haven't got the predictive wind shear switched on. So that's this switch here. So we're pretty much good to go now. let's just see what happens if we go for... We've got managed heading mode. So coming up for 120 knots. We'll rotate at 140. Gear up. Flaps up. Autopilot on. And engage speed mode. We'll immediately go for 250 knots. So we're climbing for 4,000 feet at 2,500 feet a minute. Well, that's what it should be doing. But it's gone for 2,000 at the moment, so let's just increase that. So we're now climbing towards 2,500 feet a minute, climbing for 250, or accelerating to 250 knots, and we're climbing out following the standard instrument departure fully automatically, which is all good. So let's have a look around while that's all happening to appreciate some of the scenery. So Microsoft Flight Simulator doing its thing. It's actually very good, isn't it? Okay, back in the aircraft. So we're looking for 4,000 feet. Let's see where we are in relation to that flight plan. So we've got until CLN 4S, which is here, to get to 4,000 feet. We're already at 3,000 feet. We're going to do it easily. And then following that, we'll set the climb to go to our cruising altitude of 25,000 feet. And I will pause recording at that point because you really don't want to sit and listen to me waffle on for the next half an hour. Something we completely forgot to do on the ground is set the QNH, which I'm about to do. So you can see we've actually now gone above 4,000 feet. So that's my bad on that one. Let's go and make sure we descend down. So we go back down at 500 feet a minute. Now the aircraft might not descend very quickly because it's going to have to manage the speed, so it may want to bring the throttles back before it starts descending in order to avoid accelerating too hard. So let's go and help it out a bit and give it some air brakes. Okay, we're looking good. So we're just approaching CLN 4S. The aircraft's starting to make the turn for the next leg of the trip, which is fine. Okay, let's go and set the target altitude to 25,000 feet. And set the rate we want to get there. So let's climb at 3,000 feet per minute. So aircraft's accelerating. Let's go for 250 knots. So the final thing we're going to do, which I'll do before I pause the simulator, is get to 10,000 feet and switch the QNH over to the standard, which is 2992 instead of the local QNH. This will not have reflected accurately on what the QNH was at the ground when I took off, because I didn't do it while I was on the ground. Normally you would reference either ATIS or you could go and look in Little Navmap, for example. We can show this, how we could do this. We can show information for Stansted. And we can see here, it should have been 3068 on the ground. Actually, it does agree with what happened when I equalised it in the sim by pressing B. But that's fine. So coming up to 7,500 feet, still climbing 3,000 feet a minute, holding 250 knots, which is great. In speed mode. By speed mode, what I mean by that is the throttle is on this detent, which means the autopilot can control the speed automatically with the auto throttle switched on. You can probably turn off the seatbelt sign now. Oh, but the sim has paused. Now this is obviously some sort of data loading or multiplayer issue that's going on. I've seen this quite regularly recently. So we're going to wait for a few moments for the sim to unpause itself. It's frozen basically. The way we know it's not crashed is the mouse is still working. So this is just a data server issue. So we just wait for it to wake up and the plane will carry on its way. There it goes, it's just woken back up. And you saw some of the scenery outside falter when it happened. This is an issue that's been going on for the last year, or more than that, 18 months for flight sim, but it seems to usually recover. It's fine. It will only do it once in a flight normally. Okay, let's go and turn the seatbelt signs off. So we're good. We can also turn off the light that we were using for taxiing earlier. So we've gone through 10,000 feet now, so we can pull this to set standard on the barometric pressure, so it will go back to 2992. The idea behind that is so aircraft at altitude are all using the same barometric pressure as each other in terms of the calibration of the altimeter, so they all show the same, or they, when they think they're at, say, 15,000 feet, they are at the same 15,000 feet as each other, if that makes sense. Okay. So we're just climbing out 11,000 feet. We're probably going to hit top of ascent somewhere around halfway and then actually start descending pretty much straight away. But I'm going to pause recording there because you really don't want to sit and watch this number tick over for the next 10 minutes. Okay, so I'll rejoin you in a few minutes. I'm just going to pause recording. Okay, so you rejoin us. Let's have a look at Little Nap Map, see where we are. We've just made the turn at Coa, the Costa VOR station, which we had to be below 5,000 feet at, so we have descended back down to 4,900 feet. We are doing 250 knots or thereabouts, because obviously below 10,000 feet you have to maintain 250 knots. Everything's looking good. You can see on the map display here in arc mode, we can see our destination approaching. So our next target is Dofmu. If we have a look on the map, we'll see if there's any restrictions. When we get to Dofmu, there aren't any, but when we get to Helho, we need to be above 2,000 feet, which is obviously once we make the left turn. So we're just approaching along here. So I thought it might be fun to just have a look around along the way, see what the scenery looks like. So we're starting to fly over the edge of the coast. A lot of windmills around. It's very flat. Interestingly, I just checked the information on Rotterdam, and the elevation of the airport is -2 feet, so it's actually below sea level, which is quite interesting. I wonder what happens if they get a wave come in. If it can flood it easily. Obviously, it probably has very, very good flood defences around the coast there. So yeah, we're flying in. It's looking good. Make sure that this is actually still recording. I'm not sure if it has a ticker anywhere to tell us what we're seeing in terms of time. Record, there we go, there's a ticker there now, there we go. So I am still recording, just a bit of a sanity check there. So, how pretty is flight sim when it wants to be? It's very cool, isn't it? So we're just tootling along, 250 knots, approaching Dofmu. About 25 miles to go until we make the turn. So we could actually start descending already. So if we go and look and remind ourselves, we need to be above 2,000 feet at Helho. So ideally we want to be about 2,500 feet. So let's go and start descending for 2,500 feet now. So we're going to change our target altitude to 2,500 feet. Let's select it by pulling the knob, and then we'll start descending down at 500 feet a minute. So we'll just do this gently. The auto throttle is still on. We're still on speed mode. We're still showing 250 knots. So the throttles are going to adjust to keep us at 250 knots if they possibly can on the way down. You can see the altitude is now coming down, and we are descending at 500 feet a minute, which is reflected obviously up here. Vertical speed minus 500. Looking good. When it comes into view, you will see the 2,500 feet will have a target on the ribbon, but obviously it's indicated there as well. On the way, something else worth pointing out, as when we came down through 10,000 feet on the approach to Koa, I switched back from standard barometric pressure and checked the QNH at the destination airfield, and it is 1039, so I have adjusted to suit, which means that our altitude reading over the ground will be accurate when we arrive. Interestingly, in the Airbus, as well as the barometric altitude readout, you also get a radar altitude that will appear when we get a bit closer to the ground. So if I remember, we'll point that out on the way. Just while we're flying along, we could program some other things in. So if we go into the MCDU menu and go to ATSU, AOC, and we can go get a weather request. So we're asking for EGSS and EHRD, so we'll send that, and it's sent it. If we go back out to the AOC menu, give it a few moments before we do it, what we'll do is go look in the received messages. There's nothing there yet, so let's go have a little look. There it comes. There's the METAR information. So we've now got the weather information at the departure and arrival airport, destination airports, has been sent to the aircraft, and we can actually print that out in the aircraft. And if we go and look at the little printer over here, we can see it coming out of the printer, which is really cool. I never ceases to amaze me how clever this is, that they've managed to build this into the simulator. It's very cool. And then you can tear this off and stick it on the dashboard over here. Oops, I've just gone and changed that by accident. So you can see, there we go, METAR EHRD 1814 25 seconds Zulu time, 040 degrees 04 knots. There we go, and you've got the QNH there, Q1039. So if you compare that to the map, you can see it showing here 39 degrees 16 knots where we are at the moment. But the weather on the ground, if we hover over the Hague airport, yeah, you can see the same METAR readout there. So that's showing 070 degrees 3 knots, so the wind is obviously moving around on the airfield, because it's a very slight wind. So we're coming down into the clouds slowly, coming down towards our target altitude of 2,500 feet. There's a bit of a rendering issue here. This has gone a little bit wrong on the display. I'm not going to hold that against it too much. So we're still looking good here. So what we could check along the way is 109.10 should be the ILS. Let's see if it's programmed it in automatically when we arrange the flight plan. So go and look at the nav radios, 109.10, there it is. Looking good. So we're just coming up for the turn at Dofmu, and let's see if this is just a rendering issue or if it's going to affect the autopilot. If it is going to affect it, we'll go to manual and I'll just fly it in. Not a major issue. So here we can see, I mentioned earlier about once we got close to the ground we would get a radar altitude readout as well as the barometric altitude. So this is our altitude above the ground, directly below the aircraft. So obviously we're over a hill at the moment. Actually no, we're over water at the moment. So that's showing 2290, whereas barometric is showing 2540. It's interesting that they are so far out from each other. Okay, so let's just keep an eye on this. Let's zoom in a bit further so we can see the route a bit better. So yeah, I think this is just a rendering issue with it showing the route not coming up from directly below. Interestingly, if we zoom out, I don't think we can zoom far enough to see the last corner of the route. No, we can't. So if you remember, we're going to do this left turn, get to Hellho, and then we're going to be on the ILS, essentially. So we'll watch this for the moment. And then we'll switch over to LS on the Rose display to show our landing configuration. So we're going to start bringing the speed off down to 200 knots straight away. So hopefully by the time we get to Hellho we'll be more or less configured. So you can see the speed is bleeding off already. And there goes the left turn. So far this Airbus has performed pretty much as you would expect. It would be interesting to see if it acquires the glide slope on landing. Because quite a common thing I've heard is that it can sometimes not acquire the glide slope, so it won't start descending if we're on approach mode, for example. But if that does happen, we'll just take manual control and land it ourselves. It's not a major issue. Okay, so you can see the plane has made its turn at Dofmu. It's not exactly following. That's interesting that the guidance system in the aircraft doesn't match what we can see here. Or should I say the star and then the approach don't quite match what's in RD201. So it's going via this. This wasn't in the plan in Little Nav Map, but Little Nav Map is supposed to reflect what's in the simulator. That's interesting. So obviously it's going to turn back towards Hellho now. So let's switch the rows over and we can see there's the diamond for the ILS. We're going to go to first stage of flaps now. So you can see, if we go and look outside, we'll see that happening. The wings. See them coming out, and the leading edge extending. So because these screens, this is one of the nice things about the fly-by-wire version of the A320, we've got independent control of the two screens. So you can have one screen showing LS mode and the other screen still showing ARC mode, which is really, really nice. So we still get some, some reference of where the route is. Okay, so the diamond is starting to come down. We're getting closer to the glide slope. Hopefully we'll be able to make our turn. So let's go for, as soon as we finish the turn, we will drop the flaps further and drop the gear and put the landing lights on. Okay, so we're almost lined up with the runway already. It should be doing a pretty good, it's doing a pretty good job, to be honest. Okay, flaps, gear, landing lights. And let's go for approach mode and see if it acquires it correctly. Approach mode, let's drop to 170 knots. Next level of flaps. Drop this to 160. But what I'm interested in seeing is, has it acquired it? Yes, it has acquired it. We are now descending on approach mode. So yeah, that's worked perfectly as well. So we'll let the aircraft get stable. We'll go for full flaps in a moment. I forgot to turn on the seatbelt sign, didn't I? I was a bit naughty. And we will go to full flaps, drop the speed to 150 knots, So I don't like letting aeroplanes land all on their own. I'd rather have some fun myself, so I'm going to take manual control in a moment, and we'll fly it in the rest of the way by hand. Okay, so we're in glide slope localizer mode. We're on Cat 3 single. Interestingly, let's see if the Airbus understands having both autopilots on at once. Yes, it does. We're now in dual mode, which means it should do auto land. I'm not sure if we have to do anything in the MCDU to configure that, but I want to fly in by hand anyway, really, so we'll leave that alone. Okay, autopilot off, auto throttle off. So we get the annunciation there, letting us know.
1,000.
So I have control. So we're now watching the diamond here and the line, because obviously we can't see the airfield just yet. And we're just following them down to the ground. Getting a little bit above the glide slope, so nose down slightly. I'm going to slow down as well. And there's the runway.
400. 300.
So just reducing speed.
200. 100. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 5.
And we're down. Nice and smooth. Thrust reverses. Wheel brakes. Thrust reverses off. Turn the alarm off. That's because I had the wheel brakes and the thruster reversers on a bit too hard and too closely sequenced, and it triggered an alarm. That's fine. And it's now a warning when we've switched off the thrust reversers, we're not in takeoff mode. So we can clear that on the ECAM buttons if we really want to. But the main aim of today's flight was really just to check the A320 out. And I thought it actually behaved perfectly. I can't see anything wrong with it at all. Apart from my steering, obviously, has something to be desired. So we're back onto the taxiway. We didn't quite go onto the dirt, which is good. So yeah, this is the FlyByWire A320. It's the stable build as of mid-December 2021, and it was very, very good. So we'll just hit the clear button down here, which gets rid of the warnings that appeared on the screen following my accelerated stop on the runway. Let's call it that, shall we? Obviously I didn't follow proper procedures for this. I was just more interested in seeing how the aircraft was reacting to the various autopilot modes and pressing buttons and doing things, and it was absolutely fine, and it flew well down onto the runway. It was good. Can't see any problem with it whatsoever. Okay, so should we just taxi over and stop? While we're taxiing, I take part or help run a website called virtualflight.online, and we have a Facebook group and a Discord server, and we do regular group flights. Oh, the sim is stuttering. Why is it stuttering? We do regular group flights. That's really, really badly stuttering, isn't it? Is it about to crash? No, it's gone back to normal again. Yeah, so at Virtual Flight Online we do regular group flights, and I'm not going to get in here, am I? Not easily. I'll have to go for the next run. So yeah, if you would like to come and fly online with a whole group of people, we tend to have at least one regular group flight a week, which is on a Sunday evening at 8 o'clock Zulu time or Greenwich Mean Time. And you generally get sort of 20-25 pilots, and we just do a VFR route altogether, you know, just a relaxed fly-in basically, and it's just good fun. Why is that stuttering so badly? Okay, so there we go. I'm not going to go through the shutdown sequence, so we've kind of finished the flight. And we can see there's our aircraft on the ground at Rotterdam. I think the sim's getting ready to crash, isn't it? Let's get rid of those air brakes. There they go. So yeah, A320 fly-by-wire mod works very well indeed. Pleased with that. Okay, I'll speak to you all again soon.